Clive Hensley walked into the garage like it was his own private stage, his expensive suit catching faint glimmers under the dim fluorescent lights. Then he stopped, glanced at the dusty Porsche 911 sitting in the corner of the shop, and locked eyes with the little girl holding a wrench beneath the hood of an old Chevrolet. "Let's save everyone some time," Clive sneered. "If that little girl can fix that dead machine, I'll keep this place open. If not, you all better start looking for new jobs." Comment 1. If you think that opening line was way too arrogant to go unchallenged. Friday afternoon. Sunlight streamed through the cracks in the rusted tin roof, casting stripes across the old cars sitting still and forgotten. Cole Auto Tech, once trusted by the entire Southside Atlanta community, now teetered on the edge of closure after 3 straight months of losses. Clive Hensley, owner of the state's largest garage chain, had shown up unannounced. Officially, it was a surprise inspection. But everyone knew the truth. This was an execution. No one spoke when Clive entered, just the sound of clinking tools, and worried eyes stealing glances from behind hoods and engine blocks. A 12-year-old girl, small and quiet in a faded gray hoodie, knelt beneath the engine bay of an old Chevy. That was Zahara, daughter of lead mechanic Marlon Cole. Every day after school she came here, not to play but to observe, to learn, and silently dismantle the machines around her. Her braids were tied neatly, and her eyes shone with sharp intelligence. But what made people stop and stare was her unexpected calm, as if she knew exactly what she was doing, even if no one had ever given her the chance to prove it. "Zahara, pack your tools and go home," Marlon said, voice taut like a snapped wire. But Clive raised his hand to stop him. "Number, let her stay. In fact," he turned and walked toward the covered Porsche. "I might just have a better idea." He ripped the tarp away, revealing a gleaming, newer model 911, silent and lifeless as a corpse. "This car's been to 3 shops already. None could get it running. If your little genius can diagnose the issue, I'll keep this garage open." Silence blanketed the space. No one dared react. But Zahara's eyes never blinked. She had accepted the challenge before the words were even fully spoken. Zahara stood up, set her wrench down, and wiped her hands on her pant leg. "Okay," she said, softly, but the entire garage seemed to go still after that word. Andre glanced at Tasha and whispered, "What does she think she's doing?" But Tasha just folded her arms, watching Zahara step confidently toward the Porsche. "Mr. Clive," the girl said, "if I find the problem is keeping the shop open all you're offering." "What else would I offer?" Clive scoffed. "A bonus for everyone here," Zahara said, eyes locked on his. Clive burst out laughing, clapping 3 times. "Now this is entertainment." Zahara leaned forward, her hand brushing gently over the hood. In that moment, no one saw a 12-year-old girl, they saw a chief engineer. She moved around the car like a silent symphony, eyes scanning every seam and circuit like reading a familiar book. Clive leaned against a nearby car, arms crossed, still smirking like he was watching a circus. "How long before she gives up?" he muttered. But Zahara didn't hear him, didn't care. She had already spotted what all 3 previous shops had missed, and she was one step away from proving it. "Central control module," Zahara pointed to a small black box near the vehicle's onboard computer. "Has anyone checked the digital codes coming from this unit?" Andre frowned. That's only in the newer Porsche lines. I didn't even think," Clive cut him off. "Don't be fooled by buzzwords she picked up on YouTube." Zahara nodded slightly, unfazed. "All right, then give me a laptop with internet access. I'll reload the diagnostic software and run a full scan." Marlon turned to his daughter. "Zahara, where did you learn all this?" "I studied over the past 6 months," she said, "whenever you weren't looking. I borrowed your tech manuals from the office." Clive looked around, then shrugged like he was playing along with a joke he planned to crush. "Fine. 15 minutes. Let's see the show, princess." Zahara opened her own laptop, plugged the cable into the Porsche's diagnostic port. Clive took a step back, the smirk still on his face, but his eyes squinted slightly. She doesn't realize she's just entertaining the adults, he thought. He had no idea that he had just triggered something no million-dollar fraud system could silence. The entire garage froze. Clive's smirk vanished. Andre muttered, almost to himself, She's right. I never even thought to look there." Zahara kept going, her tone now more like a teacher than a student. "If we reset the ID code to factory settings, the car will start again, but we'll need the original software to do it." Marlon turned away, cheeks flushed. For the first time, he realized, his daughter had never been playing with machines. Clive looked off to the side, no longer amused. Tasha stepped closer, rested a hand on Zahara's shoulder. "Keep going, baby. We're all learning from you now." Zahara kept typing. She didn't know that outside the garage, someone had already started filming and uploading to social media. On screen, authentication code conflict. Reset recommended. She turned to Marlon. "Dad, I need to download the original firmware from Porsche North America's tech database." Clive raised an eyebrow. "And you think a 12-year-old has access to that?" Zahara replied without looking up. "No. But I already got in 6 weeks ago." The Porsche 911 still sat there, unmoved, like the final boss in a game. Zahara didn't hesitate. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, lines of code appearing one after another. Then her voice broke the silence, calm, like she was revealing a harmless little secret. "Dad, I wasn't just reading manuals. I hacked into Porsche's diagnostic system 6 weeks ago." The garage exploded in silence. Marlon froze. Andre's jaw dropped. Clive stopped mid-step, blood rushing to his face. But Zahara didn't stop. She was accessing the truth the system never meant anyone to see. Comment 1 if you've ever hidden your talent, just waiting for the right moment to flip the entire game. No one knew that the tiny back room of the garage, stacked with old books, faded invoices, and stale coffee, had been Zahara's secret research lab for months. Every evening, she sat there with her mom's old laptop, borrowing the neighbor's Wi-Fi, decoding diagnostic code line by line. She didn't want to break anything. She wanted to understand. Why did the unfixable cars keep coming back? Why were people like Tasha and her father made to feel like failures? Those questions led her deeper into back-end portals, security protocols, and finally into something called the Wilcor network, the diagnostic grid linking Porsche dealerships across the U.S. What did you just say?" Marlon stepped forward, legs barely holding him. Zahara kept typing, eyes fixed on the screen. "I saw this car in the Wilcor logs over a month ago. 17 identical ones. Same model, same fault code, same failure, exactly 90 days in." "You hacked Porsche's internal system?" "I didn't damage anything. I just watched. I needed to understand what they were doing. To you, to this shop, to everyone here." Marlon couldn't speak. He had spent years working himself to the bone to protect his daughter from the harshness of this world, never realizing she had quietly walked into its heart. Clive stormed forward, furious. "This little girl just admitted to a federal crime, and you people are clapping?" Andre backed away. Jake looked around in confusion. Zahara kept typing. "Are you scared of what might come out?" Clive's eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" Zahara turned her screen toward the room. A bold header lit up. Wilcor maintenance logs. Internal use only. Vehicle IDs, timestamps, identical fault signatures, all laid out in a spreadsheet she'd built herself. "I just want everyone to know, this wasn't their fault." "This wasn't random," Zahara said, pointing to line 12. "Every car failed exactly 90 days after its first ignition." Tasha frowned. 90 days. Porsche's basic warranty cuts off at day 89. Zahara nodded. "Exactly. After that, they'll call it temporarily, patch it up, and resell it as refurbished at triple the price." She switched tabs. A PDF appeared. Internal contract agreements between Porsche and repair affiliates, complete with digital signatures. This isn't a product flaw, it's a business model, and Mr. Clive here gets a commission every time a garage fails to fix it. No one spoke. Clive's eyes flared red. You're accusing me based on stolen data? Clive barked, his voice cracking now. Zahara calmly opened another tab, her email inbox. A thread of messages between Clive and a Porsche regional director popped up. Subject line, do not authorize module recalibration. Push replacement strategy. Below, transfer screenshots confirming 15% kickbacks for garages that couldn't solve the issue. I don't need anyone to believe me, Zahara said, turning the laptop so everyone could see, because they're already watching. Tasha blinked. Watching? Zahara nodded. I started a live stream the moment I plugged in the cable. The tiny screen on the desk read, 943 viewers. The pounding heartbeat wasn't Zahara's. It was Clive's. Then the comments began to roll in. Central Motors, that's where they told me my car was a total loss. What's that girl doing? Are they actually exposing a real scam? Has anyone called the FBI yet? Zahara looked straight at Clive. Now they'll decide who the child really is in this story. Marlon placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder for the first time in his life, realizing he was meant to stand behind her now. Tasha raised her phone, switched to speaker. A reporter was already on the line. She only had time to say, "Call the FBI, we have systemic fraud on record." Clive couldn't stay standing. He slumped down on the car platform, face ghost white. Meanwhile, Zahara walked over to the Porsche's driver door. She inserted the key, pressed start. The engine roared, like a beast awakened. The whole garage erupted. But Zahara simply said, I didn't fix this to make my dad proud. I fixed it because they thought people like us would always stay at the bottom. Zahara had just finished speaking, but the entire garage felt like it had been strung tight by an invisible wire. Tasha stepped forward, her voice low and steady. All our lives, we thought we weren't good enough. But the truth is, you kept us blind so you could stay rich? Clive stood frozen, the cold light of the laptop screen reflecting off his pale face. Every email, every payment, every instruction laid bare. No more questions, no more pretending. He had built his empire on a lie, and now a 12-year-old girl was tearing it down brick by brick. Comment 1. If you've ever uncovered a truth no one else dared to speak aloud. It was no longer Cole Autotech. At this moment, it had transformed into an unofficial court of justice. No judge. But there was evidence. No jury. But nearly 2,000 people were watching the live stream. All eyes, Tasha, Andre, Jake, even neighbors who had begun arriving, were locked on Clive Hensley. The air was no longer thick with engine oil. It pulsed with judgment. Each line of data Zahara displayed was a blade slicing through the mask Clive had worn his entire career. And now that the Porsche engine had roared to life, there was no one left to blame. Zahara opened another tab. The screen lit up with a map of the U.S. peppered with red dots. Each one of these markers is a shop within the Wilcore network. And this, she zoomed in on a western region, is where cars were recalled after 90 days, then repackaged as refurbished at premium prices. The garage fell silent as Zahara pulled up more internal data. Technician names, order codes, purchase and resale prices. The profit margins were staggering, hundreds of millions in under a year. Clive hadn't acted alone. He was just one link in a chain, but he was the only link standing in this room. Andre slammed his fist on the table. You made us look incompetent in front of customers. You made us doubt our own skills, Jake growled. All those nights we stayed late, hunting for errors you knew we'd never fix. Clive tried to defend himself, his voice cracking. I was just following orders. I didn't design the system. Zahara stepped in, cutting him off. But you chose to stay silent. You took the payouts. And the people in this room? You let them carry the shame, the blame, the belief they weren't good enough. Tasha said nothing, just stared at Clive. Her eyes were red, not from rage, but from betrayal. Zahara turned her laptop toward the livestream camera. This is the buyback contract for 17 Porsche vehicles with identical system failures. She tapped a key. A PDF popped up with the buyer's name, Clive Hensley, Southeastern Regional Liaison. Another tap, bank statements followed. Dozens of transfers from Porsche into a shell company account. Zahara looked straight into the lens, calm as ice. You don't have to believe me. Just look for yourselves. Viewer count jumped to 3,481. The comments rolled in. They told me my issue was out of warranty. Makes sense now. Has anyone contacted the press yet? Outside, a car horn blared. The garage door cracked open. A local news reporter stepped in with a camera crew. Clive stumbled backward. Shut down the live stream. This is proprietary data. She hacked into the system illegally. Zahara turned to him, eyes locked. I didn't destroy anything. I just watched. You kept it hidden, so I made sure the whole country could see. Tasha stepped between them. This girl didn't break the law. You're the one who ran a fraudulent operation. Another horn outside. This time, it wasn't media. It was the police. A plainclothes officer entered the garage. We received a live stream report related to financial fraud. Is there a Clive Hensley present? Clive stammered, I'm the victim here. That girl, she... Zahara cut him off by opening another file. Every email between Clive and his partners in the scheme. There was nothing left to say. The officer turned to his partner and nodded. Clive was handcuffed and led away into the flashing lights outside. No one clapped. They just watched. A powerful man unraveling, not by force, but by a girl he had once dismissed as harmless. Zahara sat on the old bench at the back of the garage, eyes still on the open screen. Viewer count, 5,002. A comment flashed. Who is this girl? Get her on TED Talk now. Tasha turned, gently placing a hand on Zahara's shoulder. You know, after today, no one will ever call you the mechanic's kid again. Zahara gave a small smile, but her eyes stayed fixed on the garage door. I didn't do this to be seen. I did it because too many people were taught to believe they weren't enough. Outside, the evening light spilled through the doorway. But the real light had just begun here. Clive Hensley was led across the garage in handcuffs, the arrogance drained from his face, now ashen and hollow. As the officer read him his rights, Clive turned back, this time not with contempt in his eyes, but something closer to surrender. Why? He asked, voice choking like a confession. Zahara stood still, her laptop still open beside her, the breeze brushing softly against her neatly braided hair. She didn't answer right away, because betrayal doesn't deserve an explanation. It demands a reckoning. Comment 1 if you believe the truth always returns, to confront the one who tried to control it. Under the flashing lights of the police cruiser, most people still hadn't fully grasped what had just happened. A child, barely 12, hadn't just repaired the unfixable car. She had dismantled a nationwide fraud network. Tasha held Zahara close with one arm. Andre stood frozen, eyes locked on the laptop screen. Jake, who had once mocked her, couldn't even meet her gaze. And Marlon, standing quietly in the corner of the garage, still looked like he couldn't quite believe what his daughter had just done. The second officer stepped up and asked Tasha, "Who is she?" Tasha didn't hesitate. She's the last person he should have underestimated. Zahara walked over to her father. Marlon lowered his head and whispered, "I'm sorry for not believing in you sooner." Zahara gave a small smile. "It's okay, Dad. People only see what they think is possible. I just waited until they had no choice but to look." And in that moment, the eyes of every employee in the garage shifted. They no longer saw a child. They saw a leader. Suddenly, Clive shouted as they pushed him into the cruiser, "She's a hacker! You're making a hero out of a criminal minor?" A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. Zahara didn't flinch. She stepped forward, voice calm but sharp as steel. Yes, I accessed the system, but I didn't steal anything. I didn't destroy anything. I just exposed what you built on lies. Behind her, the news reporter spoke into the mic, and a 12-year-old girl has now drawn nearly 8,000 viewers on her live stream, many of whom are former Central Motors customers. Marlon stepped forward, this time face to face with Clive, the man who once dictated his worth. You knew those cars could be fixed, but you let my entire team live in shame for years. Clive snarled, You're a mechanic. You don't understand how the world works. Zahara stepped in. Exactly, and that's why I had to speak up, because I do understand how the world works. A ripple of applause began, quiet, respectful, not out of celebration, but solidarity. And for the first time in his life, Clive had no words left. Zahara turned toward the livestream camera. A mechanic's daughter, black, 12 years old. That's all it takes for the world to assume I'm not enough. She paused. But truth doesn't care about age, gender, or skin color. It only needs someone brave enough to say it out loud. The chat exploded. She should be teaching Congress. My daughter is watching this and crying. Thank you, Tasha whispered. I wish someone like you had shown up 20 years ago. Zahara turned back to her. It's okay. Now you get to be that someone. The Porsche engine still purred steadily in the corner of the garage, a living witness. The officer confirmed, We've received federal authorization. Everything the girl presented is being submitted into official evidence. Zahara closed her laptop and turned to the garage team. From now on, if anyone asks who fixed the unfixable car, tell them it was the Cole Auto Tech crew. Andre let out a loud laugh. Well, I just got promoted from apprentice to genius's teammate, huh? Tasha clapped Zahara gently on the shoulder. I'm guessing this is just the beginning, right? Zahara nodded. I've got one condition. A soft ping sounded, an email alert on Zahara's screen. Subject line, Invitation to speak at the National Engineering Conference, Tesla, Microsoft, Google. Tasha exhaled quietly. You've made it. Zahara turned to her father, eyes calm but clear. I'll only accept if they agree to build part of the project here, at Cole Auto Tech, with everyone here. Marlon nodded, and this time he didn't nod as a father, but as a fellow professional. This story wasn't over. It had just turned the page. Not with a punch, but with a pen. Zahara walked out of the garage. It was already dark, but the path ahead had never looked brighter. 3 months after the livestream that rocked the entire industry, Zahara Cole stood on stage at the National Tech Conference in Seattle. Hundreds of engineers from Tesla, Google, and Microsoft sat silent, eyes fixed on the girl in a tailored gray suit, her braids neat and professional. A Tesla executive raised an eyebrow and leaned toward the mic. Did you just say you hacked Porsche's national diagnostic system at 12? Zahara smiled, not from pride, but because finally, someone wanted to understand. Comment 1 if you've ever done the right thing, only to be heard after the world had no choice. The Emerald Convention Hall glowed under bright LED lights, its ceiling high and seats trimmed in luxury leather. Just 3 months ago, Zahara had been laughed at for being the 6th grader who fixed a broken car. Now she stood in front of the very people who wrote the operating systems for the electric vehicle industry. The live stream that had exposed an entire fraud operation had passed 15 million views and was now part of ethics curriculums at top universities. No one called her the mechanic's daughter anymore. They called her the girl who redefined global diagnostic standards. Jennifer Walsh, vice president of engineering at Tesla, stepped forward and handed Zahara a folder. Zahara, we'd like you to consult on a real-time fault detection system powered by AI. Initial offer, $2 million for a 3-year contract. The room stirred with whispers. Zahara accepted the folder, but didn't sign. I need time and one condition. Her hand trembled, not out of fear, but because she knew this signature wasn't just a contract. It was the first sentence in a new chapter, for the garage she came from. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. What condition? Zahara looked up, eyes steady. I want part of the project built at Cole Auto Tech, with my team. She hadn't come this far alone, and she wouldn't move forward alone either. A senior executive from Google shook his head slightly. Zahara, we're talking about global scale, keeping part of the build in a small neighborhood garage. Honestly, it'll slow the rollout. Zahara didn't flinch. That slow garage was once called worthless. But they're the ones who taught me to hear engine misfires, to feel when a machine doesn't start, not because of hardware, but because something is wrong. She paused. Her voice dropped. If not for them, I wouldn't have uncovered any fraud. The room froze. No one dared speak. Jennifer studied Zahara for a long moment, then nodded. Fine, but on one condition, you lead the community division of the project. Can you handle that? Zahara smiled for the first time during the entire presentation. Yes, ma'am. Not only can I handle it, I've been ready. Tasha, seated in the back row, gently reached for Marlon's hand. He still looked like he was watching someone live a different life. But Zahara hadn't changed. She was still herself. It was the world that had finally been forced to see her clearly. On the screen behind her, Zahara presented her real-time fault monitoring platform, Clean Codes, a system built on error data, maintenance patterns, and deep learning. No one interrupted. At the end of her talk, the entire auditorium stood and applauded, not politely, but with full conviction. Zahara bowed slightly, but just before stepping off the stage, she said one line that silenced the room again. Intelligence is a privilege, but using it to keep others behind is cowardice. She was no longer a little girl. She was a voice redefining the ethics of an entire industry. After the event, all three companies signed a joint agreement. Clean Codes would be partially developed in Atlanta, at Cole Auto Tech. The media dubbed it Silicon Valley meets street-born brilliance. As for Zahara, she returned to the old garage, sat beside Tasha and Andre, and began building the first hands-on training lab. No fancy furniture, she said, just strong Wi-Fi and 12 working desktops. Tasha grinned. I think you just made an entire industry relearn how to listen. Zahara shook her head. I just reminded them, knowledge doesn't belong to the richest. It belongs to those brave enough to ask the right questions. 6 weeks later, a new sign hung above the garage. Thompson and Daughter, Automotive Tech and Education Center. Hundreds of students from local public schools lined up to attend free tech classes. A reporter asked Zahara, aren't you worried you're giving away too much, that others will surpass you? Zahara didn't hesitate. I didn't fix that Porsche to become famous. I fixed it so no one else would ever be dismissed just because they came from a place like me. Under the soft gold light of Atlanta's evening, Zahara looked at the building, now a training center, and whispered to herself, they once called this place useless. Now it's where the future is built. A 14-year-old girl stood up in the middle of the James H. Watson High School auditorium. Her eyes showed hesitation, but her voice rang clear. Miss Zahara, what if you hadn't fixed the car that day? What if you hadn't hacked the system? What if you had failed? The entire room went silent. Hundreds of students waited, staring at the black girl who had once made the national auto industry bow its head. Zahara didn't answer right away. She just looked the girl in the eye and stepped down from the stage. Comment 1 if you've ever asked yourself what would happen if you failed, or if you never dared to try. 2 years had passed. Now 14, Zahara was enrolled in a special MIT program for gifted youth. But today, she wasn't standing in an Ivy League lecture hall. She had returned to Atlanta, to the public school where no one once believed she'd amount to anything. Here she spoke to a new class of students about tech, about truth, and about courage. A new banner hung on the wall. Don't judge brilliance by where it's born. Her audience wasn't made up of executives or investors, but of kids who had once been overlooked, just like her. Zahara held the mic, her voice slow but steady. 2 years ago, I was just a 12-year-old standing next to a car no one could fix. What helped me fix it wasn't genius. It was being underestimated so many times. I had no choice but to search for the truth myself. Tasha, now director of the Clean Codes Training Center, sat front row beside Marlon, Zahara's father. Andre was now a lead instructor in applied electronics. They weren't mechanics anymore. They were educators, guides for the next generation. The same girl repeated, "But what if you had failed?" Another voice added, "What if the live stream had glitched? What if no one believed you? What if Clive hadn't been arrested?" Zahara's lips tightened. The question wasn't wrong. It was real and necessary. She flashed back to the first time her hands trembled around a wrench beside Tasha, to the live stream that almost lost signal in its final minute. She knew there were moments where the smallest error could have made the whole dream vanish. She stepped up a level on stage, letting the emotion show. I couldn't afford to fail, not because I was sure I'd succeed, but because I had studied too long, watched too closely, and prepared too much to waste that moment. She paused. The worst kind of failure is not standing up when you already know you're right. Zahara projected the first image she had captured from inside the Wilcor system. This was the moment I knew I had to act. The screen showed a blurry gray map marked with dozens of red points, signs of technical fraud. I could have stayed quiet, could have kept the proof to myself, but what made me go public was knowing too many people who were good, but had been made to doubt themselves. The same student asked, "What about now?" Zahara smiled. "Now I build systems that make sure you don't have to wait until someone calls you good enough to speak up." A short documentary clip played, Zahara receiving the Young Innovator of the Year award. Clean Codes now operating in over 2,000 garages and schools across America. Former CEO Clive Hensley sentenced to 18 months of probation, fined $500,000, stripped of his entire business chain. But Zahara didn't brag. She glanced to the back of the room, where a group of students wearing STEM for Us shirts held up whiteboards reading, "If she did it, so can we." Zahara placed her hands together. No speech, no high volume, just quiet because recognition no longer needed to scream. A teacher approached Zahara as the session wrapped up. "What advice would you give to students who have nothing but curiosity?" Zahara looked over at a model car in the corner, an exact replica of that Porsche from years ago. "Teach them how to ask questions, not how to answer them." The teacher nodded, moved. Zahara turned back to the crowd of kids. "The system didn't collapse because of me. It collapsed because it couldn't define me. And then everyone realized the people once labeled as unqualified were actually the ones best fit to rewrite the rules." That evening, Zahara sat alone in the workshop, now a full community tech center. Marlon brought her a cup of hot cocoa, just like the day she picked up her first wrench. "Were you scared back then?" Zahara shook her head. "I wasn't afraid to fail. I was afraid that if I didn't act, no one else would dare start." Marlon smiled, eyes filled with pride. A young student ran in, holding up a faulty blueprint. "Miss Zahara, my system's giving me an error, but I don't know why." Zahara stood up, closing her laptop. "Then let's go find the right question and write the answer ourselves. This isn't just the story of a black girl who fixed the car no engineer could. It's a reminder. Never underestimate the intelligence that comes from the places you never bothered to look." Zahara Cole wasn't born a genius. She was just a kid who listened, who observed, and who had the courage not to stay silent when she saw something wrong. In a world where too many are judged by how they look, not how they think, Zahara proved that silence is not weakness. It's preparation. To those who've been talked over in meetings, who've been called too young, too different, too bold, who've had to walk into rooms never built for them. Remember, you don't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes your calm presence alone shakes the system, and when your moment comes, like Zahara, you won't just speak for yourself, you'll speak for everyone who no longer can. To those building companies, teams, institutions, let diversity be more than a slogan. Let it be an action, because talent doesn't come with a label, only systems. Struggle to listen. And to you, watching this video, if you've ever been misdefined, start rewriting the definition. No permission needed.